Ya la la ya la ya la la ya la la ya la 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 ya la la ya la oh ya la la ya la ya la ya la la ya la 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 ya la ya la oh. Welcome everybody. This feels like a very special evening, because it is a very special evening, as we welcome Leah Gold, our visiting artist. And we've never had a visiting artist before. This is such a wonderful moment as part of celebrating the DJC's 25th anniversary. Momentous. So this is the first of many opportunities to come to meet Leah and get to be inspired and sparked by her and be in conversation and creativity together. And I want to turn it over to Elise Rich, our Director of Education.
Hi, everybody. I want to second what Rabbi Miriam said, which is like, I'm just so excited. I'm so excited about this year and having Leah around. It's going to be so special. And in part, the reason that it feels so special to me is that Rabbi Miriam and I have dreamed of having a guest artist for many, many years. And there's something about the 25th anniversary that seems to have galvanized enough energy and resources to make this happen for our community. In part, I want to say thank you because we've received an anonymous donation for $2,500 for our 25th year that's helping to make this program happen. And we've applied with Leah to a grant from the Ontario Arts Council as well, hoping to expand even further our offerings that we have with Leah. So, in addition to it being a special year for DJC, there's a variety of reasons why we've always dreamed of having an artist in residence. And Leah said, why don't you share those with everybody? And I thought, okay. So, the first reason that we've always wanted to have an artist in residence is because we believe so strongly that the arts can deepen and affect our experiences of learning, of spirituality, and also, really importantly, our experiences of community building. And we've had such successful moments of this in our community in the past, whether it was Rabbi Miriam, including movement or creative writing or song, and Cantor Lisa curating music and prayer song and spiritual celebrations, or curating offerings from people in our community. And of course, we've had other guest artists sort of drop in, and artists from our community sharing their own work. And we're really excited. It feels exciting to build on these moments that are so fundamental to who we are, but in a robust way and in a longer term engagement with Leah, which we haven't really had with anybody before. And as you'll hear, and I don't want to spoil it, Leah's going to tell you she brings a lot of experience, both pre-COVID and even during COVID, of using art to reflect on or inspire communities. And Leah's level of artistic skills and how she uses them are really special and really drew us to her and her work. So we also knew in planning this that the DJC is full of artists of all sorts. Most of you here are artists of some kind, I think. Musicians, we have textile artists, visual artists, theater, performance artists. And we knew that everybody would be really excited to get in there, to play, to learn some new skills that are maybe outside of your skill set, and to do so Jewishly and in Jewish community and with a Jewish lens. So I'm kind of hoping that this honors the artists in our community to bring their full Jewish selves, to bring their artistic selves to the same work. But I don't want to scare anybody because it's not about experts here. And I know that Leah is ready for us, no matter our skill level. I do not have very well-honed skills in visual arts, so I include myself here. And we know that one of the things that we love about the DJC is that everybody's always a learner. And everybody's always acquiring new knowledge and wisdom. So in my role as Director of Education, I really wanted an artist in residence to help deepen the arts work that we do already in the Jewish Studies and the B'nai Mitzvah programs, to offer more professional development, to our teachers, and also for reasons of representation. I really believe that our youth, it's helpful to our youth to see many examples of Jewish artists in their time, in their many years with us, because I think it offers them ways of imagining their own pathways down the line, and seeing how other people bring their full selves to their work, their Jewish selves, their creative selves, their social activist selves, whatever parts of their identity. So we hope that the foundations that Leah is generously helping us to lay this year, are the groundwork for more residencies in the years to come, that this is the start of something hopefully annual, and that we can bring in artists who work in diverse media and methodologies and continue to learn and experience with them. I know that Leah is offering us rich and thoughtful and fun opportunities to be together this year. And I'm really pleased, can you tell, to be able to welcome Leah formally tonight. So the plan for this time together, which is pretty brief, is that Leah is going to speak about her work, and she and the rabbi are going to speak about the workshops and the learning series that we have planned. And we're gonna, at the end, have questions, like a Q&A period, that I'm going to help to curate. So if you have questions that are burning throughout, you can send them to me in the chat, and I will save them for the end in case you think you might not remember or something like that. So we will welcome a discussion at the end and some questions. And in the meantime, Leah, if you're ready, I'm going to hand this over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm really honored to be here. Thank you, Elise. Thank you for that generous introduction. It's really special for me to, as you said, be kind of bringing my work, I guess, my full self into a Jewish context. So I haven't worked formally in this capacity in a Jewish community before. So I'm really excited. I'm really honored to be here. And every conversation I've had with members of the DJC, whether it was sort of our initial meeting talking over the whole idea, or my meetings with Rabbi Miriam and with Elise, have just been so warm and engaging, and so I'm pumped. I'm really excited, and I'm here to learn. Also, I feel like that's sort of the essence of being in residence, kind of being in community with people while I'm making art, is that I am bringing a certain approach, which I will talk about, but I'm really looking forward to the things that I make and the things that we make together being informed by the knowledge that I know a lot of people in this community have, by the things that Rabbi Miriam is going to bring, and by some new learning. I have my Hebrew school learning, my day school learning, and my my Jewish summer camp learning under my belt, but I'm really excited to kind of engage in a new way and make things together. So I thought I would start by doing a bit of a slideshow and just kind of showing you some things I've made before and talking a little bit about my approach to making artwork. I know, as Elise told me before too, actually, that there's a lot of artists in the community here. So I don't know. I hope it'll be of interest. Just, I know everyone has their own approach to how you make work and how you teach. So I'll talk a little bit about my strategies and my techniques and my process, and show you some things I've made before and some collaborative projects that I've worked on, and project that I'm just wrapping up right now. So I do have a couple COVID projects under my belt made collaboratively from a distance. So that's kind of been a new process for me, as I'm sure we've all been adapting, like whatever you do, whatever kind of work or relationships or whatever you have, everything has to be adapted right now. I'm going to talk a little bit about my art practice, and then also about my practice as a community artist or as an art educator, but really they're quite intertwined. And I've been working in sort of like communal spaces for a long time. I guess it's important to me to be working with other people and not just kind of in isolation. So that has meant a few different things. It's meant managing shared studio spaces for many years. I used to run an arts-based network of home-based play schools. So it was a whole bunch of artists, musicians, and educators working together with young children and kind of doing sort of the exact opposite of the way that we're living right now. So it was really based on taking kids out into the city, visiting art studios, visiting galleries together, recording in music studios together, making comic books with comic book artists, like just being all over the subway and the airport and whatever the kids were interested in. But that was one kind of collective project that I was very involved in with for a number of years. And then there's my community practice where I'm going into schools, libraries, different arts organizations and doing projects that involve a whole bunch of participants. But in those shared studio spaces that I was managing for a long time, I developed my drawing practice. So most of what I do, I consider to be a form of drawing. You'll see as I show you these slides that comes through in various materials. So sometimes I'm drawing on ceramic, or sometimes I'm using what I think of as like modular drawing, where I'm involving stamps that I've carved myself or elements that other people have made. But it's sort of all about creating these two-dimensional images that are built up of little marks. So I sort of consider it globally as part of my drawing practice. So I just put in, these are, look at these drawings, these are like old friends, because I think these are from 7 or 8 years ago, these first couple drawings, but these are quite massive 5-foot drawings that I did in order to kind of, I wanted to feel like I was getting lost in the mark making of these drawings. So those are a couple early drawings that, like all of my drawings, I was thinking a lot about the natural world and about close observation. So I would go out to High Park or out to a field in Picton or wherever I was working and find plants and dried up bits of things and bring them back to the studio and get involved in these very, very close observations around making these silhouettes, which are actually kind of hard to see on this screen, and then work on getting kind of lost in the mark making. But you know what? I don't even want to talk about those drawings that much. I'm going to talk about this series of drawings. So, and I'm going to slow down for a second. It's funny always being on Zoom because I can kind of see your faces, but it's very one-way conversation I'm having.
We could be saying, ooh. Do you want us to go like, ooh, when you
No,
speak?
it's okay. You don't have to do that. I'll just assume. No, I wanted to show you these drawings, not necessarily because I wanted you don't have to ooh and ah, that's fine. But I wanted to talk about the process. So something that's really important to me in how I make work is the idea of playing within constraints and then letting that bring in elements of chance and the sort of arrival of like mining for imagery, I guess, within myself. So I think of this as a form of play by putting all these rules on what I'm making, and that's something I do with myself and also something that I do with students. So one way that this kind of manifested in my art practice is that I developed a daily drawing practice, a daily drawing routine, which was very constrained. So I had 5-inch by 7-inch pieces of paper, and I gave myself 1 hour on a timer, and I always started by trying to draw a perfect circle in the middle. And they were done with powdered graphite and ink. And part of the reason they were done with powdered graphite was because I was working at a community arts center called Art Heart, and they gave me a jar of powdered graphite. And I sort of like those chance kind of encounters with materials where it's like, okay, I have this, so let's explore it and commit to it. So I started doing this practice a few years ago, and this is based on the work of a few different teachers whose work that I was reading at the time. Linda Barry is one who's an awesome cartoonist, but also an incredible teacher. Julia Cameron wrote The Artist's Way, which I'm sure lots of people are familiar with. But this idea of kind of producing through these rules. And so these are some of the drawings that came out of that. This is sort of a whole series of them that sort of deals with Some mental health and sort of emotional wellness or unwellness ideas. But the imagery just arises from having those constraints and seeing what kind of surfaces during that time and then building on it. So I worked with that for quite a while, sort of playing in this way. And then that evolved into that's another piece from the same series, into a further series where I, in the same fashion, was kind of playing with constraint and rules and timers and trying to just produce these daily drawings to see like what was in my brain, like what I had been absorbing and what I was thinking about. So a further constraint arrived in the form of having children, which when they're very small, really like shrinks down the time that's available to be in the studio. So I revisited an idea I had had a long time before that I'd been working with through printmaking, which was to do what I mean, it's stamps. It's just stamps. But I think of it as this kind of modular way of drawing. So I would hand carve these stamps. So the imagery that you see repeated are all carved rubber stamps. And then there is some drawing as well. And I sort of went through the same practice of having these 5x7-inch pieces of paper and just using the repetition to kind of see like what imagery would come out. There's a lot more of those, but there's just a couple. Another thing that's been important to me in the last few years has been producing ceramics, which I'm definitely not a master potter by any stretch. I do sort of the bare minimum that's required in order to get myself a surface that I can draw on. So that is sort of another form that my drawings have taken in the last few years. So these are just a few of those pots that I made. So I guess I spoke about this idea of like chance and constraints and rules creating space for play. And also I think another thing that is important to me is this idea of like visual joy, I guess. I mean, I don't know if it even needs to be stated, like you're making art, you want it to be feel good to look at. Although not all art feels good to look at, but for me, this sort of sense of playfulness and spectacle is something that I really like. So even when things get a little dark, which they did in this series, they're still kind of funny. So that is just something that seems to come out in how I work. I do make murals, so I just wanted to show you. I think the imagery kind of carries through, and all of these. This was for a restaurant. This is actually a 5-sided mural, so it's the ceiling, the walls, all the way around. But all of these little creatures, this was called Spring Fever, and it was sort of about people coming out in the spring and getting all excited. But the imagery all came from those daily drawings that I was doing, which I then sort of expanded and threw up on these walls. And that's just another little mural from that same restaurant in the back. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit. So that's kind of how I work on my own, is I create these games and constraints for myself, and I make a lot of drawing, and it's playful and it can be fun. I want to talk a little bit about how I bring my practice into a community setting and how I work with other people. So and I'm like, what do I got to tell you? I have a couple notes. Okay, this was a really special piece for me, this creature here, a few years ago when I was running this play school that I mentioned. So I had this kind of scene. There was a lot of people around. I was managing a studio space in Chinatown, which was really lovely. There were probably 5 or 6 artists in it at the time. And I was also running this play school with a friend of mine who's a very close collaborator now. So I'll go on to show you a couple projects that we've done together. Her name is April Aliermo. She's a sound artist and a musician. And she was also trained as a teacher. So she's the one who initially founded this play school. So we would pick up the kids from their half-day kindergarten program, and we would, get on the streetcar and come to my studio once in a while, or we'd go to the park, or we'd do all kinds of stuff. But bringing the kids to the studio one day, I had this we were playing around with ink, and I had this idea that I wanted to make a drawing using stuff that the kids had made. So I asked them to make me a bunch of marks on paper, and we cut them all out. And then once they left, I made this mascot for them to take home. And he was a pretty sizable, it's maybe like a 2.5 foot kind of creature for them to take back and put in their space. And I was just really pleased with the whole process, and that kind of informed how I build a lot of my projects. I guess I always have this like funny looking creature in mind that we made together. And I actually always think, and this is like a tangent, but I think a lot about this dance company I was involved in when I was a teenager, where they were quite wonderful about taking us seriously and helping us feel like artists. And they would have choreographers come and set work on the dancers, these young dancers. And I liked that sense that we were kind of like, not like tools for the choreographer, but that the choreographer is creating this piece of art and using these young artists to like enact it. So that's one approach I sometimes take, and that's sort of what my most recent project has been. It's asking people to make something and then me making something out of what they've made. So we're working together in that way. Okay, this is a fun project. Elise, am I good? I'm just rambling all over the place, but yeah, okay, great.
You're good. You go for it.
Okay, so I want to show you a set of 2 recent projects that I did. So I mentioned April Aliermo. So we have had a couple residencies with the Toronto Public Library. Well, through the Toronto Arts Council, they do this really awesome program called Artists in the Libraries. It's sort of in the same vein as they also have animating parks, I think. They put artists into parks and animating historic sites. So there's these sort of wonderful programs that happen all over the city in different places. We've been in the library a few times, and the library is just like everybody comes through. So it's a really wonderful place to make art together. So our very first project was called So Much to Eat. It wasn't called that initially, but in the end, that was a quote we pulled from one of the participants. So much to eat, and it's so fantastic. And what we wanted to do was sort of gather a record of people's memories around food. We felt like it was a really beautiful way to talk about personal history, about culture, about place, about migration, about growing up, and all of these things, because you just get these really vivid memories when you're talking about the foods you like to eat, the foods you ate growing up. So what we did was we went into Brentwood Library, which is in Etobicoke, and we kind of parked ourselves in the foyer. We were there for a few months, and we just kind of asked people if they would talk to us. So April would conduct these interviews asking people about, what was it like in your kitchen when you were a kid? What foods were special to you? And people would talk about the gardens where they grew up, or they would talk about holiday foods or the first times they tried a new food. And there were all these beautiful things that came out of it. And then after we had this collection of interviews, I ran a series of workshops in the same location. With some of them were just whoever wanted to show up. Some of them were sort of, we reached out to see if there were seniors who wanted to participate, if there were teenagers who wanted to participate. We just tried to get a whole variety of people to see who would come. And we made all of the artwork that illustrated the stories. So I'm going to come out of the slideshow and just show you the website. So I'm not going to take you through the website for too long, but there is a website that we made for this project. So if you go to hijinksart.com, I can put it in the chat, I guess. If you go to hijinksart.com, you'll see 2 projects. So our first project was called So Much to Eat, and it's so fantastic. And the second one was called Roam and Play a While, Memories of Childhood. So if you click on the project you want to see, you can see these circles that kind of represent each story. So there are straight stories, and then there are what we call soundscapes, which are little soundscapes that April made, kind of remixing bits of audio from these interviews. So if you have the time and you want to hear some great stories, there are these really lovely stories that you can click on. So if you
We
click
always had a garden in Trinidad. We had lots of.
I'm going to play that for you. I'll just play you about 30 seconds, but this is Winnie talking about growing up in Trinidad and climbing the fruit trees in the garden, which she was not supposed to do. And you can see we have a photo transfer of Winnie herself. We've got this wonderful tissue paper collage, and then we've also got these collagraph prints in the background. So many different people were involved in making each of these illustrations. And then at the end of the project, we turned it into this oversized hand-bound book. And we also made little hardcover books, and we made this website where you can see everything. So it was a really wonderful process, and it was really fun to share with everyone at the end at our big party. But this is what it's like if you go to the website.
We always had a garden in Trinidad. We had lots of land, a house in the middle, and fruits and vegetables grew around, even coconut, fresh coconut. And we just had to go and pick and come and cook. And my mom going to cook, she could just go in the garden and cut fresh stuff and bring it home and cook it. Even meat, it was live chicken that they will kill and have, Eggs were fresh from the hens. We had mangoes, tangerines, orange, coconut, lots of land, even bananas. We had bananas, plums, cherries. You just name the fruit my dad used to plant. We had fruits around our house. My dad said they don't want us to climb the trees, but as soon as when he not home, I used to climb up the tree. Because girls are not allowed to climb the trees. I just wait till he not home, then I used to climb.
So they're lots of fun. There's all kinds of different stories that you can click through and see. And I did have a couple more images from that project to show you. I love this page with the mushrooms, talking about gathering mushrooms and going out in the fall in Finland, and this knowledge that's sort of passed down from within families to know what mushrooms to forage for. And this was just a beautiful in-between page that we put it was the end paper of the book. And this was a scratch foam print workshop that we did one day doing different fruits. And then next year we did the same format of project in a different library in Maria A. Shuka, which is also where I'm working right now. And this time our theme was play. So we asked people about their memories of toys and games, which again gave us like a sort of beautifully global perspective on these different toys. So we heard about playing, oh my goodness, where were people's different games from? I mean, people growing up like in Toronto and playing at the Humber River, but also in Jamaica, in Mexico, and I mean, just like it was. You can go and look at it. It's wonderful. In the Philippines, people from all over, but just remembering these games that used to play. So again, we had a mix of young and old coming to these workshops, and there are collagraph prints and tissue paper collage. We were looking at Eric Carle's books, The Very Hungry Caterpillar. He has a nice little tutorial in his website about how he illustrates those books. So we took some of those techniques. We did some stamping because I was had gotten into carving stamps for those sort of modular drawings I was working on. So we're bringing that in, and all these different people working with all these different techniques coming together. We made, again, the website that you can go see. And this time, instead of making a hand-bound book, we made like a full color magazine that each person could take home that had all of the illustrations in it. I really loved this page. It's a game called Loteria. It's sort of a bingo game, and we had one person illustrate each of the Loteria cards and then collaged it together. And the story on that one is great about how competitive his grandmother is at Loteria. So my last project that I'm going to tell you about is the one that I'm finishing up right now. Again, this is at Maria A. Shuka Library. I have had some other, I did a run of COVID projects in for the TDSB last year as well. I don't have any pictures of those, but we did make some really lovely artist books about the kids' experience right now. So I am kind of interested in this project that I'm going to show you at Maria Shuka. It was sort of the opposite. It was like a total escapist fantasy project. But I did do one project last year where I asked kids to reflect on how things are for them right now. So that's something I was working on in the spring last year. So this fall, wrapping up this week, I've been working on a remote project for the community at Maria A. Shuka once again, which is at Dufferin and Eglinton. And what I did rather, this one I was doing by myself, is I put together these kits so people could come to the library and take one of these envelopes. This is my filling station where I was sort of getting everything ready. And it had instructions and all of the materials that they needed to either make a scratch foam, styrofoam printing plate, and also to make some of those prints at home, which is, I think, a technique that I'll bring to the school for the DJC, and to make these sort of oversized creature drawings using paint markers, which I don't think I have a picture of those kits. But I sent on these 2 kits, and the idea was that we were going to build a total escape fantasy land, and that it was going to be in the windows of the library so that people walking by could have a little bit of an imaginative jolt, I guess, and see these sort of fantastical creatures and plants all over the place. They have these beautiful, it's like a 30-foot stretch of windows along Eglinton there. So I sent out these kits in September, and lots of very enthusiastic participants took them home from the front desk of the library, just the way they would check out a book. And then when I got them back, I had a whole bunch of materials to catalog. So it was lots of fun to see what people sent. But I was sort of approaching this the same way, that approach that I talked about of thinking of this as both a collaboration and also as a way of people making tools for me to explore a little bit. And this is, I guess, one of the ways that I feel like this is intertwined with my own art practice is that this element of kind of chance and constraints and working with what's in front of me, I feel like it's the same whether I'm imposing that on something I'm making or whether I'm receiving those constraints by getting a bunch of stuff that other people have made and working with them and seeing what's going to happen. So these are some of the styrofoam, people made these styrofoam printing plates for me, and I used those to make prints, which I'll show you. And they also drew these really fantastic creatures. The prompt was to sort of imagine a creature that you would create or that you would like to encounter. So we have this like flying giraffe. There's all kinds of creatures came back. But one of the things that I really enjoyed seeing about this was giving, especially kids, a lot of kids did the drawings, giving kids the chance to work at a scale that they don't normally work at. So I sent 4-foot pieces of paper with the instructions to fill the paper with this one drawing. And you sort of get these, it's like you get the gesture and the spontaneity of a young child's drawing, but at sort of a grand scale, which makes I think they're a lot of fun to look at. So once I had all of those elements back, I started making a printed landscape for these creatures to live in. So I used those styrofoam, these styrofoam printing plates that people had carved, and I printed with them. So I created this watery landscape for this mermaid unicorn thing. This is already hung in the window, so you're sort of seeing it come through like a bit of a stained glass effect from the inside, but it's meant to be, this is me composing them, it's meant to be viewed from the outside of the library. And this is, there's probably 4 or 5 people's prints on this page making this little field of flowers. This is 2 different people's prints. And this is going to prove really hard to document, I think, because it is hung in a window, so it's very reflective. But if you go to Eglinton and Dufferin and you walk along these windows, you'll see this very fantastical landscape taking over the entire front of the library there. This is a friend of mine helping me hang everything up. But you can see how these creatures are sort of interacting with each other, and they're in these field of flowers created by all these other people. So there's actually 70 people's work in this piece, which I was really, especially hearing the sort of disheartening news this week, I felt really pleased that we were able to create something together, even though we were apart. I mean, it's really heartwarming for me to see people's work together, since that's usually something we do when we're in the room together. And there you can kind of get a sense of what the whole piece looks like. So it's very playful. It's kind of silly. I think it's fun. And it's I'm going to be there this Sunday from 2 to 4 if you want to see it. And then there'll be flower-shaped cookies. That's our big art opening, and it will be outdoors distance and mask, so you can take your cookie home with you. And I think that kind of takes me to where I'm at right now, Elise.
So, first of all, I just want to say, I don't know how other people are feeling at the moment. I have all this like vibrant energy in me from watching and receiving. The color, the shapes, the way that you talked about your own process and the process with community. And that's so delightful to notice what art does. Some of us in this Zoom call may spend a lot of our time engaged in color and shape and the activity of art making on a regular basis. For some of us, not so often. And it's part of everybody's life in some way that we are creative beings. And so I feel that part of me being sparked. And it makes me very excited for the process that we're going to be in together as a community with you. I want to say a little bit about the conversation that you and Elise and I have been having about bringing together Jewish learning and art making. And before connecting with you, this interrelationship is something that I have found a lot of richness in. Leading and co-leading workshops, either by myself or with other artists, and being more of the text person. And our conversation, I want people to know that it was quite an iterative process of you bringing forward a proposal that was rooted in relationship with nature and using objects from nature as sparks for our art making. And then we were engaged in conversation about, so what do we want to focus on? Is there a Jewish holiday? Is there a particular set of Jewish images or particular Jewish texts that we want to swim in or that we want as our grounding? And we talked about the moon and we talked about different trees, and we came around to Tu B'Shvat as sort of a sparking set of images and ideas. Tu B'Shvat, the new year of the trees, that this year will be on January 16th in the evening and 17th during the day, developed into a Jewish mystical celebration of eating particular fruits and nuts and releasing the divine sparks trapped in these shells. And that became a spark for us to talk about the dynamic of insides and outsides and ways that we might explore visually and artistically, as well as looking at Jewish texts that engage a conversation around the outsides of things and the hidden inner potential. So there's going to be a 4-part Jewish learning series on Shabbat mornings in January and right at the beginning of February. That will be an opportunity for community members to delve into texts around insides and outsides. We're going to be swimming in the universe of Lurianic Kabbalah, 16th century images and sources, and then other sources that spark off of those sources, to give people just a little bit of a taste. I hope this doesn't become too esoteric or abstract, but Rabbi Isaac Luria lived in the 16th century in Tzfat, and sort of drawing on Zohar and Kabbalah that came before him, especially 13th century Spain. Um, he developed sort of a new wave of Kabbalah. It's those 16th century Tzvat Kabbalists that invented Kabbalat Shabbat, the singing and the going out to greet the Sabbath bride, and this sort of love affair that is sparked by welcoming in Shabbat. And they took Tu B'Shvat, which was sort of tax day for trees agriculturally, and turned it into a mystical, cosmic, and mystical inward liberation and process of transformation through eating fruit. I love it. So, and it's worth saying for having this in our imagination, Isaac Luria imagined or perceived or had sacred insight or created a myth that very different from the creation story that is described in the book of Genesis, that's very orderly and God speaks and each thing comes into being. He described what's called Shvirat HaKelim, the breaking of the vessels, which is sort of a Jewish Kabbalistic way of saying a big bang, that basically creation was the result of a huge cataclysmic explosion of energy, of divine energy that physical and material reality could not contain. And so this divine light shattered, and all of material reality is the garb for divine sparks everywhere, masked and hidden. And however you might want to relate to that narrative, I find it so evocative and so contains tremendous possibility for art making, in that it is, that means all human beings contain divine sparks that are for us to liberate, to recognize and release, that everything that we eat, everything we do, that evil that we encounter, pain and suffering that we encounter, also contains divine sparks. So it's, I think, a very contemporarily relevant set of images and language for how we engage with what is unjust or painful in the world, how we engage with nature, and how we engage with our inner lives, playing with insides and outsides and hidden potential. So these learning sessions are going to be an opportunity to really chew on some of these narratives and images. Every session, Leah is going to, in partnership, we're going to think together, and Leah's going to offer some optional homework assignments for art making based on the texts that we look at in the different classes. And then the workshops that Leah is going to be offering to the community. At this point, people will be able to choose one workshop. It'll basically be the same thing, but offered at different times. So everybody will have hopefully an opportunity to work with Leah. The text classes can also serve as kind of sketchbooks, a set of imagery and inspiration to bring to the workshops. And the workshops can serve as sparks and creative playing, working with our hands, with visual, with materials and imagery, to bring back into the learning. So I'm excited for this interplay and back and forth dynamic. And you'll have to come to the sessions to find out more about how eating a nut can liberate the divine. How does that work? I don't know. Come to the sessions. So now I'd love to ask you, Leah, to speak about some of the ideas that you've been developing around how our community will play with art making.
Sure. Well, as Rabbi Miriam said, I did sort of approach with a particular idea, which was to look at it was basically to look at the natural world and draw from the natural world through a Jewish lens and to really root ourselves in where we are. So I had kind of been one of the things that led us to talk about the moon was I had kind of been reflecting on this fact that I knew that we operate on a lunar calendar. And I know the holidays happen in particular times in that lunar calendar. And yet it took me until like last year, I think, so many years of observing these holidays to step outside and realize that it was a full moon. I think it was Pesach on a full moon. And it was a full moon. And I was like, oh, it must always be a full moon on Pesach. And I never noticed that it was something I could directly observe and feel connected to. And I think that part of being in a diasporic culture is there is all of this beautiful imagery around like fruits and grains and traditional plants, and they're not ones that we see around us. So I wanted to find ways to connect to, like I was thinking, oh, all of these things arose from people looking at what was around them. And that's why, of course, obviously, and it's not just like some abstract thing that appeared that the pomegranate became important. It was like this beautiful thing that, is can be ripe with symbolism because we can draw all these beautiful symbols from what we find around us, and we've now we receive this imagery over thousands of years. So I wanted to find a way to kind of reconnect that with things that we could observe around us, so we could feel kind of rooted in the natural world and not just in text. So that was where it's kind of my jumping off point conceptually. In terms of what we're actually going to be doing, I think that the imagery and the nature of the collaboration is going to kind of evolve out of these learning sessions. So because I'm going to be learning as well. And also, as I said, it kind of, like I like to work with what people bring. So the idea is that we will produce, at the end, there will be a collaborative artwork that is produced. Could be that I produce it with bits and pieces of what everyone has made, and that we are going to be using printmaking. So I can say with pretty great certainty that we'll be doing some very, very approachable printmaking methods. I really like to make sure that everyone feels comfortable and that they can participate. And I also like to have this sort of beginner's mind for myself as well, where the idea is to just make what we can with what we have and then make it beautiful. But not to feel like we need a certain level of expertise or mastery before we start. So we'll be working with very simple, very non-toxic, very replicable techniques. So it's also something that if you want to take it home and kind of work, build your own little home studio, these are things that are very easy to do at home as well.
Beautiful. So I think this is a great moment to see if folks have questions. I'm going to remove Spotlight and go to gallery so we can see each other.
We're happy to take the questions out loud or in the chat, whichever way people are more comfortable. It's obviously fairly informal. No questions at the DJC?
Give it a second.
I have a comment.
Great.
I think your work is really creative and whimsical, And I think it's a great match, and I'm really excited to see what comes out of all of this. So welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tamar. I love the playfulness. Like, there's something really cool to me about the idea of like constraints and playfulness going together, which I find really compelling in Leah's work too.
Yeah, and I could, there's a wonderful, I mentioned Linda Berry briefly. If you are someone who's interested in process and in making art in either writing or drawing, because I think a lot of the things about artistic process is that the medium is not necessarily the thing that's the most important. I mean, certainly, like, if you're working on craft, like, you keep working on the same thing, you're going to improve and you're going to master that thing. But in terms of ways of creating and ways of creating like habits and rituals around creating, I think that translates across different artistic media. So Linda Berry has a really wonderful book. She has two books. I think What It Is the one that I'm thinking of. And like I said, she's a comic book artist, but she writes about how to write. And so, yeah, if you're interested in constraints and in play, it's this great book about her process, and it's all drawn, like the text, it's all hand drawn. And at the end, she has a bunch of games, essentially, for sort of creative prompts and ways to draw up imagery. So it's a nice place to start.
I'm like making notes.
Yeah, everyone should read that book. It's a great book.
Alan, it looked like you have a question.
I just wondered, are you considering incorporating music as well in this? I know you talked about a previous project you did where music was also part of it, and we're a very musical community. I think that's fair to say overall. I wondered if you considered some kind of melding of different art forms, not just the visual arts, but also music.
I would certainly invite it. So when in the projects that I was speaking on, I did have another artist who I was working with who did like all of the sound stuff and kind of handed over the visual things to me. So in this kind of limited form that we have planned for right now, we have just a few workshops planned. But if you have ideas for how we could bring it in, I'm sure, I mean, it like as responses as well to the learning series, that'd be cool.
I would also add two things. One, we won't find out if we got the grant until March, I believe. So if we do get additional grant money, then the opportunity to expand how we're working together and what we're building together, there's much more room and flexibility. And I would also say that what we do with the piece that is made and how we celebrate it and inaugurate it certainly can involve music. And I think there are beautiful questions there about how we sort of leverage this opportunity with other artists who are in the community, and how we bring everybody in different ways.
Yeah, I think part of the reason why we specifically put a call out for a visual artist for this year was because we had the idea that on our 25th anniversary, we wanted a visual piece of art for the end result. But these folks are quite right that doesn't mean there's no opportunities for music to be a part of it. Just that we didn't ask that of Leah herself. But I'm quite excited to talk more about it. And we have thought, in future residencies about having artists from a variety of disciplines that is part of our future hopeful thinking as well.
Are there other questions or comments?
I have a quick comment just to thank Leah for showing us a bunch of your artwork and projects and taking us through your process behind them. Yeah, really interesting, and love the art, and really exciting for the projects you and Rabbi Miriam will be doing.
Thank you.
I don't know if you can hear me, but I have a couple of things to say.
Yes, Linda.
Okay, because I'm kind of new at Zoom. First of all, Leah, I think that you have a beautiful expression on your face. And so I would be looking forward to working with you and feeling that expression. It shows your art and it shows your playfulness and it shows, I don't know, a heart. I was wondering if the workshops you're going to do are going to enable text through some of the visual stuff as lots of art is doing these days. I saw that in some of the pictures you showed where they were kind of narrating, and if poetic text can run through it in the workshops you're doing.
Yeah, it wasn't something that I have yet considered, like in terms of the specifics, but actually you're right. I do incorporate text quite a lot. So if that's something that you know what, you're gonna I think people will notice this if you come to workshops generally. If you ask me something and you have an idea, I'm like, yeah, because it's it's exciting to me to see what people bring. So yeah, if that's something that for you feels like sort of an authentic way to explore different ideas, I'm always open to text being added to what we do, with the caveat that we will be doing printmaking and text comes out backwards. So we have to think consciously about how to do it, but certainly it can be done. And one of the projects that I shared, so I actually there's text in both of those library projects that I showed, do have text incorporated. I was thinking of it as sort of making a picture book. And the first one, because we were doing all this printmaking and I really wanted it to result in this hand-bound, totally handmade, oversized book. It's like this big. I had a set of alphabet stamps and I stamped every letter in the book, which took so many hours. It was like a sort of a ridiculous undertaking, but it was kind of a wonderful process to really carefully like stamp each letter. The next year I scanned the stamps and did it digitally, so I now have a digital font like called Stamps or something in my computer that I made. But there's always ways to, yeah, I'm interested in incorporating text for sure.
And in the workshops you're doing, you call it printmaking. And I'm just wondering if you could give me an example, let's say, or just encapsulate what might involve the first couple of workshops, because I'm a little confused. Will it be the kinds of things that you have up on the windows where from the inside out we create from Jewish thought and Jewish history and mysticism into animals and people and creatures? Are those the kind of workshops that you'll be giving us or guiding us in?
I think when we do the printmaking, so in terms of the prompts for the learning workshops might be more abstract, in that they might be using a sketchbook and kind of exploring those sort of inside out ideas. And because it's going to be attend one printmaking workshop. I'm going to show you how to make a print, which I'll describe in a second, that process. And then I'm going to incorporate those all into one, probably a textile work that can be hung in the DJC space. It will probably be a lot more concrete, actually. So one of the images that came up when we were talking through these ideas was the idea of looking at cross sections of things. So just even looking at like nuts, seeds, fruits, flowers, and all of those beautiful sort of silhouettes and patterns that you can find within those. So a possible workshop that I could imagine for this would be something like, we're going to look at, maybe at the end of describing this, we'll just write it down. This is what we'll do. A possible workshop could be, we're going to look at some of these traditional Tu B'Shvat symbols, and then we're going to look at some parallels to them that we might find here. So we might have like an almond, a date, fruits that would grow in Israel, and then we might find black walnuts or a plum, or things that we might actually find growing here where we live. And we might just do some very concrete exercises of like slicing them up and arranging them and looking at them in different ways, doing a couple drawing exercises. And then basically a print just means you've got a drawing is where you're making your mark directly on your paper. A print is where you've made your marks on something else, and then you use ink and transfer it onto a piece of paper. So it could be that we make those with cardboard by cutting out and gluing cardboard shapes. Could be that we draw into styrofoam. Could be that we lay things down on a surface like gelatin and roll ink on top of leaves or different shapes of things to get a silhouette. But those are sort of three different techniques that we might use. And then we would take those drawings that we've made and translate them into these printmaking methods, and we would print them. So you would have a print to take home, and then I would probably take what everyone had made and sort of remix it into one larger artwork.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Elise, are you wrapping up or shall I?
I think you should.
Hey, it's time to wrap up. Leah, thank you so much for sharing your artwork, for sharing yourself, for sharing ideas. We are so excited. Everyone, thank you for being here tonight. Elise, I want to thank Elise in particular, who did the lion's share of the grant application. Well, Elise and Leah together. Elise really put so much thought and so much work into it to make this happen. Thank you so much, Elise.
It's happening. It's really happening.
Everyone, stay tuned for information. In the January newsletter, there will be lots of information about all the dates for learning, for workshops, and we'll get to create together. Thank you all for being here. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you so much. It was
Thank
really
you.
great to see everyone.